Welcome to the Relationship Help Show. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, the Relationship Help Doctor, and I'm here for you. Today we're going to talk about ways to stop tolerating abuse. Abuse you may not even have recognized that is happening now or that happened earlier in your life. Maybe you'll hear something today that you really need to hear. It's my hope that you will. You're not alone. It's not your fault. You are not to blame. And I'll help you use that redirected energy to recover and to rediscover you, your values, your dreams, your desires, and then realize them in healthy ways and in healthy relationships at home and at work. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to the Relationship Help Show. I'm excited that you're here, and I hope that you are too, because every week we have new things for you, new guests, new ideas, new ways of dealing with the toxic, difficult people in our lives, and this week is no exception. This is episode 33 of the Relationship Help Show. And today, I'm going to start a little series that you'll get in parts each week, which is called How Do I Learn to Trust? So that's something to look forward to. Also, have a great guest today, Dr. Michael Rhoberta, and we are going to be talking about, you ready? Betrayal, trauma, and relationships, and even talking about emotional affairs, what they are, and why they're so devastating. That will be with Dr. Michael Rhoberta. And then I'm going to do a Q&A and answer a listener's question. And what a question it was. The question was about, should I listen to my therapist who told me to just stop reacting and do nothing when my hijackal husband goes off like a Roman candle, or should I be setting boundaries, or what do you think, Dr. Shaler, she said, and I'm going to share that in the last segment of today's show. So lots of good things for you here. Remember, you can listen live any Tuesday night at bbsradio.com, 6 p.m. Pacific, and go bbsradio.com/relationship help show. Anytime you can go and visit the archives at BBS Radio or at relationshiphelpshow.com. Stay tuned. Such a great show for you today. Talk soon. Hello, this is Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. Are these stories and questions on today's show sounding familiar to you? Are you ready to say no more to the abuse from toxic people in your life? I'm so glad. You matter, and you deserve to have real love, true love in your life. Love from yourself and love from others. Not that demeaning, discounting, and dismissive masquerade that a hijackal pretends is love. I can help you regain yourself, your self-esteem, your self-confidence after a life with a hijackal, whether it was your partner, an ex, a parent, or a child. Let's work together now. For individual sessions or small group coaching, visit forrelationshiphelp.com/join. Talk soon. Trust is a big issue, especially if you've had a hijackal parent and then you have a hijackal partner. Or if you just created a relationship with a hijackal, you come to realize it. Then you have to ask yourself, how do I learn to trust? So in part one of this, I'm just going to give you a few background information pieces, and then next week we'll have part two. So perhaps one of the most demanding and dangerous principles of anyone's spiritual journey is trust. Many people think of trust as an economic commodity that can be earned or offered as a reward. The reality is, I think, that trust is a gift. No one deserves it. No one is owed it. Trust is fairly dichotomous in that you either give it or you don't. There's no middle ground. You can't trust a little or a lot. You either trust or you do not trust. To trust a little is not to trust at all. So to be able to trust another person, we have to be able to trust ourselves. That's usually the place where the whole system falls apart, right? What indication do you have that you actually trust yourself? Are you trustworthy? I can tell you one quick way to find out if, under all, you believe you are trustworthy. Ask yourself if you keep your commitments to yourself. That's fundamental. And of course, you can figure that out easily because did you ever make a New Year's resolution that you didn't keep? That undermines your trustworthiness to yourself. We need to trust that we have what it takes to deal with life as it unfolds. And if we lack this basic level of trust, we're constantly living in fear that catastrophe is just around the corner and that we may not be able to recover from it. We're always waiting for that proverbial other shoe to drop in life. And if you've had that in your background, with a hijackal parent, it's going to be even more. And many people then doubt their ability to deal with the pain, the difficulty, and complexities of life. So they seek to avoid being exposed to these normal and natural, though unwanted aspects of life. And then within those attempts to avoid the exposure, that is the seedbed of drama and escape. The ego actually trusts no one, not even itself. Since we can't give gifts we don't possess, I talk about that all the time, the ego can neither give nor receive trust. And people who have been abused or traumatized find trusting others to be extremely difficult. So what is trust? There are many complicated definitions found in the dictionary, and in our book, Soul Solitude, Taking Time for Our Souls to Catch Up, we approach it simply. And we define trust as a matter of mattering. If I matter to myself, then I can trust that my life has meaning and significance. Because my life has meaning and significance, then I can trust that I have what it takes to realize that meaning and significance of my life. I can trust the source of the meaning and significance of my life because I matter to the source, whatever we term that entity or system. Because I matter to the source, I can trust the base premise of the central spiritual principles. Key to our work with trust is this simple affirmation. Everything is as it must be now, right in this second, because I can't do anything about it. I am at peace. I choose to be at peace. If I can trust this to be true, then I have what it takes to deal with everything that unfolds in my life. I can trust that I will experience things that will assist my soul in learning and growing, and I can trust that such experiences may be extremely difficult for my ego. I can trust that people will abandon, betray, and destroy me, and I can trust knowing that they are capable of causing me pain and difficulty, but I can trust that I have what it takes to deal with such matters. I have every reason and every right to trust no one. But if I fail to trust the source, myself or others, my alternative is to live in fear and trembling. And even though my life will end in death, I need to trust that even that mystery is part of the larger mystery which engulfs me. Trust seems impossible, but it is absolutely necessary. I hope you'll think about those things until next week when we do part 2 of How Can I Learn to Trust? This is Dr. Shaler. Talk soon. Life as a couple can be exciting and enriching. You both feel supported, known, heard, and appreciated. You know you're safe. Is that what you're experiencing? Does your partner have your back? Can you be vulnerable safely? Do you trust each other fully? Would you say you are emotionally intimate? If not, things can get much better. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, and I work with couples just like you all over the world by video conferencing. If you want a world-class relationship, learn how now. Visit forrelationshiphelp.com/join and schedule a time to work together. Let's talk soon. forrelationshiphelp.com/join. So welcome back. This is part 2 of my interview with Dr. Michael Regier, and we're talking about some fascinating things, some things that relate to hijackal, some things to relate to couples who just aren't seeing eye to eye and maybe haven't seen eye to eye for a long time. And finally they come and they get some help. And we were talking about emotional affairs and betrayal, and this is important. So I promised that we would start the second part, Michael, by talking about toxic relationships and how that relates and changes the dynamic here.
Yeah.
And you know, because you know my work, I coined the term hijackals because I don't like people going to the Google goddess and saying, my partner behaves this way, and then they get some kind of psychological label, and then they go around saying, well, my partner is a narcissist or a borderline or a sociopath or whatever, and now it's all my partner's fault.
Right.
You know, and that's inappropriate because hijackals have traits, patterns, and cycles that you are engaging and enabling. And so we need to learn about those. So let's talk about what happens when somebody gets into a relationship where that one person, as you were saying in part 1, seems so confident and so strong and everything, and the other person is attracted to that because they may be anxious. So they feel like this is a great bond.
Right.
And then there is a shift occurs, or the anxious person starts to blossom. What happens then, Michael?
Yeah. Well, when that shift occurs, it begins to destabilize the relationship. And so the anxious person will try to pull the other person in, will express more emotion. And in our work, we're always talking about this emotional interchange. And what we say is that the emotional cycle, not each other, is the enemy of the relationship. And if you can understand the push and pull of the emotional cycle, you can learn how to escape the cycle. So when in this kind of therapy, it's really intense because the therapist actually moves the emotional people even more into emotion, but tries to get them in their primary vulnerable emotion rather than their reactive emotions. And so when they can talk out of that place of vulnerability and feelings of loneliness and hurt and sadness, and then the other person can, in a vulnerable way, say, I get it, I'm feeling your pain, and I want to be there for you, then that begins to de-escalate the cycle and the relationship begins to heal.
Okay, so what happens if you're with a hijackal and you go to the hijackal, the toxic person, the person who has been set up to be the person who needs nothing, the person who is always in control? Of course, that person is very fearful, and they'll shatter in an instant. So they do all of these things so that they don't shatter and they protect themselves. How they do that is to get power control over other people. So what happens when the toxic person decides to go out and have an affair and says to the other person, well, you shouldn't care because you're such a mess. I have to do something.
Yeah. Well, that's cruel. And, you know, if they come in, we work with that. That is a defense. It's really a fear of getting too close to the other person's pain. And it's kind of like gaslighting. It's saying, you're crazy. I'm okay. You shouldn't be reacting the way you are. And again, that is part of the negative cycle. And we work with that. And what we find is that, you know, that person that looks confident, when you really get underneath of it, they're incredibly afraid. They're incredibly vulnerable.
But will they admit it?
They do.
In your experience, you see, because my practice is focused on these people, what I have found is that they will only come into a relationship with a professional if they believe that they can exploit and seduce the professional. And at the moment that they find that they cannot, that they're actually seen, they storm out and storm off.
You know, there's always the outliers. And so there's always some people that don't respond to this form of therapy. But The majority do, but the professional has to maintain neutrality, has to continue to focus them back on the emotion, back on their vulnerability. Takes a lot of skill, but it's possible. And EFT is an empirically validated form of therapy. It's got tons of research and it has great outcomes. So, it's being practiced all over the world. And we turn these kinds of relationships around a lot. But people have to learn safe emotional communication, and they can't do this blaming because, as in the Gottman research, when people stonewall and they blame and name call, those are the big predictors of divorce.
Yeah, they are. And, here's why I'm asking the question, Michael, because my audience are people who have really experienced life with a hijackal, whether they've had a hijackal parent or a partner they're currently with, or an ex, or someone in the community or at work. And there is no getting anywhere with this. It is always the hijackal here, the other person here. And the hijackal has no interest in any kind of personal growth, any kind of inquiry. They simply need and want to be right and find fault. And I want to make sure that my audience realizes the distinction between those who can and will go in a direction that you're speaking of, which is great. And there are those people, as you say, in the Gottman research, when they're stonewalling and withholding and blaming,
right,
and they refuse to move from there, which is often the dyed-in-the-wool hijackal, the hijackal who has both the DNA markers, the brain chemistry, and the background that has put them in that position, who are incapable and unwilling of moving in that direction. So say more about how you determine whether this couple can be helped.
Well, I think the first test is, whether they care about the relationship enough to want to get into therapy.
But what if they care about the relationship enough because the hijackal wants more power, and so they come in and they tell their story in such a compelling way to the professional that the professional says, oh, I see this, and begins to then be less than neutral.
Well,
And
then you're not working with the right professional, because it's our job not to get seduced by that.
I so agree with you, and I wanted to hear you say that, because so many times I have clients who say, you're the first person who didn't go down that path.
Right.
And I understand that many professionals do not see people in this way. They don't have those people in their practices very often, and so even they read about it in a book somewhere, but they don't actually understand what that lived experience is.
Yeah.
And so they do that. But I was so happy that you said that, because it is so rewounding for a couple to go, the partner so hopeful that there's going to be a shift in the relationship, and the hijackal so determined that they're going to come out on top.
Yeah, I mean, the whole power and control piece is, in my experience, it's rooted in their fear.
Yes.
And the professional has to be able to see through that and not be seduced by it, that person needs to be brought back over and over and over again to their vulnerable emotion. And
which they're not happy to see.
They're not happy to see it. And this is hard work. EFT therapists, I train therapists now, supervise them in their certification, but just the certification process is just hundreds of hours of taping sessions and having somebody that knows the model look at your work, because we are human beings as therapists, and emotion can be scary. And I know how long it took me to stop sitting back in my chair and just basically do the reflective thing, as opposed to getting right close, up personal, stop the person who's, belittling the other person and saying, look, I need the other person to talk now, and move back and forth, identifying the cycle, identifying the triggers. It's really hard, grueling work, but that's what changes the relationship, because people don't know how to be in a safe, emotionally connected relationship without using these kinds of toxic defenses. And it's our job to help them learn a better way.
I so agree. And, when you're listening to this, and if you're in a difficult relationship, know that there are many avenues to go down to get help. And people like Dr. Michael Regier, my guest, he can help you determine, can this actually work, or is this actually best left? And that's the work that I often do with people too, because you don't know that. Your experience is your experience of the relationship, not the experience of hundreds of relationships.
Right.
And so we have a way of helping calibrate whether or not things can get better. And that's not an instant assessment by any means. It takes a while, doesn't it? We've got to talk with them for a while and pull at the edges and see what's really here, and see how far people will go to actually tell the truth and talk things out, or how much their fear gets in the way. How long do you think it takes to determine whether or not a marriage can, in fact, improve?
That's a great question. And we kind of work at it from a place of neutrality, most of the time related to that assessment, unless it's an obviously abusive relationship, and we say, then you need to stop the abuse and maybe leave the relationship. But that's rare in my experience. What we do most of the time is make the assumption that if people want to be in the relationship and they want to do the work, that there's a way for them to improve. And so, some couples can successfully do that in 15 sessions. I have one couple, I'm on my 6th year with them.
Yes.
And
well, God bless them for hanging in.
That's right. Yeah. But they've wanted to keep trying, and they've come out of severe trauma, both of them, and have made remarkable gains. But some people just need to do more work than other people, and it just depends. So.
Yeah, and I would add to that conversation, Michael, that sometimes having a person feel safe enough to even talk to me one-on-one, if they're in that very fearful, dominant, avoidant place, takes a lot of time. Like, I'll have people who will talk to me, and they maybe talk to me 3 times, and then you get a little too close to their pain, or they feel it's too close and they feel that it's a danger to them. They're going to lose their facade of being the perfect person in control. And so they withdraw, and then they come back again and dance around it a little more. Is that your experience?
Yeah. And basically it's, all the research predictors suggest that the most important thing is the therapeutic alliance, how the connection that we're making with our clients. And so we try to make it as safe as we can. We try to connect the best that we can, but we give people the room to open up as they're ready to open up. And that's an experience of a safe relationship for them that they may never have had before.
So let's talk about something that you expressed in this way, and I think it's a great place for us to finish our conversation, is you say that there is something that is the appropriate emotional expression vital for lifetime love. What is that?
Well, it's basically being your authentic self with another person and being able to tune in. We call it emotional attunement, attune into what the other person is feeling and validate those emotions.
Right.
We call emotion energy in motion, and we don't judge it. We simply, in a primary emotional relationship, we want our emotions to be accepted by the other person. So when we feel that acceptance, when we feel that validation, then we bond and we feel close. And then when conflicts come up, whether they're money or sex or whatever,
Children.
yeah, children, right? Then it's so much easier to talk things through when we know we're emotionally safe and secure with each other.
So much to learn. Now, we talked at the beginning in part 1, we talked about attachment. And obviously, Dr. Michael Regier is somebody that you can look to for more information on that. You might also be interested in my conversations with Dr. Gary Salyer, because we talked about attachment a great deal there. And we've had also guests on trauma bonding and things like that. So all these things are related. So be sure to go back in the archives and pick up some of these pieces of gold that are there for you on the journey. So, Michael, this book that you've written, Emotional Connection, the story and science of preventing conflict and creating lifetime love. I think that book must be 6 inches thick. I read it.
It's not. In fact, it's actually a pretty easy read. It reads a little bit like a novel because of the story part of it. So all of that, we try to take the reader through those different stages of conflict, trauma, and repair in a way that makes sense, by helping them identify with this couple, and then my gently explaining the science which is underneath of it. And so I think your readers will find it's a really easy read, enjoyable read, as opposed to something that's daunting.
Well, I really wanted you to say that, Michael, because when we hear the word science in the title of a book, there's a bunch of people go, whoa, maybe not. So I just wanted you to clarify that, because we do need to know that we're not alone. And
that's right.
Scientific study allows us to know that here, a whole lot of people are going through this. You're not alone.
That's right.
And that's why it's a good thing to have the science to look at too.
Yeah.
So this has been a great conversation. Thank you, Michael, for being on the program.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You're so welcome. Is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
I just want to leave them with a lot of hope. Sometimes if we've had a relationship failure or two, and I've had a failed marriage, people can begin to think that they're damaged and they can't have a great relationship. And that's just not true. We can learn to repair whatever these patterns are of insecurity and really have a wonderful relationship if we can learn what's underneath of our insecurity and practice healthy emotional communication with another person.
Beautifully said, and it sounds exactly like the title of your book, Emotional Connection. So my guest is Dr. Michael Regier. You want to hear more about him, you want to read more about him, you want to get his book, so go to michaelregier.com. You know how to spell Michael, but it's REGIER.com. So make sure you go to michaelregier.com. And for more of this wonderful conversations with remarkable experts, go to the archives, go to relationshiphelpradio.com, look at all the shows there, go back and learn and listen. And I hope that we'll have Dr. Regier on again. Thanks so much for being with us, and let's talk soon. Hi, this is Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. Handling hijackals is exhausting. It's never ending, an endless cycle of crazy making, alienation, and constant drama. And cycles are difficult to step out of. I know, because I've been there too. And that's why I reach out to you to offer the insight, skills, and strategies you need to heal. My small group programs, Handling Hijackals and Hijackal Recovery and Rediscovery, will shortcut your journey to healing, to save your sanity, and to stopping the crazy making. Visit forrelationshiphelp.com/join now, and let's talk soon. Welcome to this segment of the Relationship Help Show. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. I'm here with my guest, Michael Rhoberta. I'm excited to have you on the show, Michael, because you've got new things happening, things that are just in their infancy, just being birthed into the world that are going to change things. So let me tell everybody a little bit about you. You have a PhD from the California School of Professional Psychology. You've worked at Johns Hopkins in the Department of Psychiatry. See, good stuff, folks. And he did postdoctoral internship in couples group psychotherapy. And currently, he's in Visalia, California, where he's the director of the Center for Relational Excellence. And if you want to know more about him, you can go to michaelregier.com, and that's Michael, Regier.com. So welcome to the program, Michael.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. I always love to talk to colleagues, especially people who are new to me, and meet them and find out what they're all about. So we've had a time to chat and all. But I'd like to ask a question that I think my listeners might have, because you say that you focus on emotionally focused couples therapy. So could you explain what that is?
Yeah, emotionally focused therapy was developed by someone named Sue Johnson. And it was developed out of years of process group, of watching how couples interact. And that got paired with attachment theory. Mm-hmm. And the whole theory of and method of working with couples was developed, called EFT. And like the name implies, when we work with couples in emotionally focused therapy, we focus on emotion primarily, more than content, and we want to understand the emotional exchange back and forth.
Okay, so are you talking about story at that point?
Actually, we're just talking about patterns of interaction and reactivity, even more than the narrative. So what we care about is when you talk to me, then what's happening inside of me emotionally that's causing me to either move closer or to react to you. So we want to understand those triggers and de-escalate the negative cycle. So just about all couples that come in are in the middle of some kind of negative cycle. So we de-escalate that, and then we deepen the connection emotionally.
Interesting. You know, I'm interested in the work of John Gottman, of course, and everybody. And what he tells us is that all his research, because for those of you who are watching and listening don't know, he did a lot of hard data research, scientific research into the different components of relationship. And his research told him that a couple has a problem usually for up to 6 years before they get any help. Mm-hmm. That's a long time to be living with conflict or dissonance or disconnection. Mm-hmm. What's your experience with that, Michael?
6 years or longer. I mean, I get couples in my practice. I had a couple come in that were in their early 80s and were still struggling. They've been struggling all of their relationship. So, you know, attachment bonds are powerful, and people don't break them easily. And, you know, it's unfortunate that when the connection has produced a negative cycle of conflict, they don't get in sooner, because we have really great ways now to help them heal that and find happiness that they didn't even know that they could have.
Yeah, and you know, the words that you used, breaking the cycle, so important, because my work, although I do work with couples a lot, and I do all my work through video conferencing, so my clients are all over the globe. And when I wrote the book Kaizen for Couples, you know, there's a lot of things in there to positively move your relationship to a closer, more emotionally intimate level. But you're just currently have a book that's out there called Emotional Connection, the story and science of preventing conflict and creating lifetime love. That's a lot. Yeah. Story and science and preventing contact and creating lifetime love. So tell us about your book.
Yeah. So our book is, we call it a fiction nonfiction. It's a fictional story about a couple we created, and Paula actually does that writing about the story of a couple named Ben and Claire who have this, they're a very attractive couple. He's a surgeon, she's a photojournalist. It's like they were highly attracted to each other, felt like they had the world by the tail, until they got married. Like so many couples, they got busy in their individual careers. And then he found himself opening up to a colleague and having an emotional affair, and she discovers the text message. So I won't give the whole story away, but basically we go from story to the therapy office, what's happening in therapy, and I outline that narrative. And then we move from there into the science of attachment. And what we try to do is, couples don't understand that what happens in their first 2 years of life translates into their adult attachment dynamics. So we take them from present day back into their childhoods, and we talk about the insecure attachment styles that they both developed in their childhood years that followed them throughout adolescence into their adult relationship. And we try to give the reader the big picture of what that looks like. And then the other piece of it is trauma. And when there's a relationship betrayal, people get traumatized. I cannot tell you how distressed, troubled people are that have been betrayed. I mean, people don't even understand how much people suffer from relationship betrayal. And how you handle trauma has everything to do with whether the relationship is going to survive or die. And so we talk about how important it is when there is trauma to get help, and get help with turning toward the injury, and really, for the betrayer to be really authentically, emotionally sorry for what they did and supportive of the person that's been damaged, so that trauma can heal and that the attachment bond can be restored. So we try to help readers understand that.
That's a whole lot. Let's break that down a little bit. First of all, I know many people have heard the term emotional affair.
Right.
But it's really important for people to understand what happens, because when somebody gets on Facebook, for instance, and they start looking forward to getting to their computer, and they start using terms of endearment with somebody,
right,
that is something that people feel, the partner often feels is kind of a gray area, and the person who is doing that is saying, oh, it doesn't mean anything, I'll never meet this person. And sometimes we don't get into the absolute naming of it. It is an emotional affair, and it is causing a rift in our relationship. So what have you learned about emotional affairs that I might not have mentioned right then?
Well, most of them actually start kind of like you were saying, pretty innocently. People get disconnected somewhat in their relationships. Just the way we work together as male and female colleagues, we can start talking about our work together. They say, oh, why don't we have lunch? And now we start talking about our kids and our lives. And then all at once we find out, oh, wow, we've got a lot in common. This feels really good. And then we make the, really desperate, terrible mistake of saying, yeah, and I feel kind of lonely in my relationship, right? And then, wow, there you have it. So now I've got somebody else supporting me in my loneliness. And our brains at that point, because our brains are constantly searching for attachment bonds, they light up like Christmas trees. And we are excited about it. And people don't get it. I mean, this is a really big deal, because all of the sudden, all of that new love neurology gets lit up, and we get a big dopamine surge. And even if we aren't sexually active with that person, we are obsessed. We're like we're on cocaine in this relationship.
Exactly.
And can't put it away, right?
No, and you don't want to. Like,
Right.
I deserve this. I deserve
Yeah.
to feel good.
Yeah.
This is a great thing.
And we're not
And
doing anything wrong, right? I mean,
no,
it's
and you can justify it like crazy.
yeah,
You know, I've been good. I'm not doing anything wrong. I am simply with a colleague or with a person online or
yeah,
whatever. But
yeah.
it's not that simple because those bonds. And I want to go back to the other things that you were saying a little earlier, Michael. And this first couple of years of life, you know, I've had clients who said to me, "Oh, what difference does it make?" Well, yes, it makes such a difference,
Hmm.
because what if you were a person who experienced ACEs or SENS, which are adverse childhood experiences and
Right.
childhood emotional neglect? What
Exactly.
if that happened to you? Like,
Yeah.
I've done shows on that, Michael, so
Yeah.
people can go back and refer to that.
Yeah.
But
Good.
we're talking about when your brain chemistry and when your experience of the world was coming into you through your senses,
Hmm.
not through the language, but through the tone of voice or the
Right.
feeling,
Right.
as opposed to knowing what those words meant. It was just, what was the feeling I got? And what did I get the idea of who I am? Am I okay? Am
Right.
I safe? You know, things like that. So talk a little more about those first couple of years of life and why they're so important.
Well, they're so critical. Alan Shore at UCLA talks about those first 2 years of life in terms of what happens with brain development. But it's in those first 2 years that our brains are doubling in size and all of the neurology is getting in place for, either feeling secure or insecure. And what most people don't understand is that it's the quality of the emotional communication in those first 2 years. We've got to remember that infants are pre-verbal
Mm-hmm.
in their first year of life, and then they start verbalizing. But most of what they communicate in terms of want and need comes through emotion. So depending on how caregivers are responding to that emotion, it will either create a felt sense of feeling secure or insecure with the people that they depend on, or person that they depend on the most. We call that the primary caregiver, the primary attachment figure. So that attachment style, either we're going to be insecure and be grasping and reaching for connection, or we're going to become avoidant and just shut down those emotions and build a wall around them and not act like we need anyone. And so what happens a lot of the time is that one person with an insecure attachment style, an anxious attachment style, will meet this avoidant person who looks like they have it all together, right? They look like, boy, this guy doesn't react. He looks cool, calm. This person can take care of me, right? So then the anxious and the avoidant get together.
Oh, and now we've got a match made in heaven, and we're going right down into my territory, which
Right.
world of the hijackal, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's all unconscious. I don't make it anybody's fault, but I really try to help them understand that this dynamic, this reaching for someone who shuts down, because the person who's reaching is reaching with a lot of unmet emotional need, and then the avoidant person gets flooded by that, because the avoidant person self-regulates by squashing emotion.
Right.
So that dynamic creates even more insecurity for both of them, and that's what causes the reactive cycle that we're talking.
Sure. So, this is what happens when you get the extremes, particularly. You get somebody who's, let's just put it in really common language. We get somebody who is in a situation where they're very, very anxious, and what they become is a people pleaser and a doormat.
Right.
And they go and they are attracted to somebody who seems powerful and has it all together, like you said,
Mhm.
and knows what to do, and maybe even
Mhm.
tells you what to do, so you
Mhm.
feel secure.
Mhm.
And then all trouble starts,
All trouble starts. That's right.
because
Yeah.
this is really not going to go anywhere good over time, because we've got this incredible big person with this small person who is slowly being
Hmm. Yeah.
And I love what you're saying, because you put it into some words that my listeners haven't heard before, which, think about it, everybody. That happened to us when we're little. It had nothing to do with us.
That's right. So what you were also talking about, Rhoberta, was that trauma happens. So we call it developmental trauma when it happens when we're young, but people get abused or betrayed or
Or neglected.
neglected, right? And so they kind of pull it together, and sometimes those people are overachievers. They act more adult than they should when they're young, so they really look like they have it together, and they enter a relationship that way. And then the other person has some kind of affair or betrayal, right? And that just opens up, it just activates all of that insecurity. And just kind of like overnight, this person who looked like they were overachieving absolutely regresses and falls apart.
Mm-hmm.
And then the person who did this thing, that doesn't think that this thing is that big of a deal, it was just emotional, then begins to say to the other person, you're overreacting, pull it
You're
together.
too sensitive.
I'm sorry, let's just put this behind us and move on. Well, we don't just put it behind us and move on. We've got to repair that injury to move on.
Yes, and these are wonderful things, and we're going to talk more about them in the second part. So my guest today is Dr. Michael Regier. You can find him at Michael, REGIER.com, and learn more about him and his great book, Emotional Connection. You can go and find that too. I hope you will. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about toxic relationships and how all of these things we've spoken about in this part relate to what happens when you're in a basically toxic relationship and what you can do about that. So stay tuned. No matter what's happening right now, life can get better. If you have a good relationship, it can become great. If your relationship is in trouble, we can find a solution. The good news is that it's in your hands to start. The not so good news is that it takes time, new insights and skills, and a whole bunch of willingness. But who would settle for less? Not you, right? Good. You want to feel seen, heard, known, accepted, and appreciated. You want honesty, safety, trust, respect, and reliability too. Read my book, Kaizen for Couples, available for download at couplesbook.com. Start there, and let's talk soon. Hello, and welcome to this segment, and it's the question and answer segment of the Relationship Help Show. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, and here's the question. And you can always ask a question. You can submit it, and I will answer it anonymously, or you can give me a name you'd like to be called by, or you can use your real name. And all you have to do to submit your question is go to forrelationshiphelp.com/submit. Easy. So you can ask your question, like I said, anonymously, and I will answer it. So it's a really good opportunity to ask a very important question, which is probably on the mind of many, many people who listen to the show. So today I have a question from Button. And her question is this: for 10 years, I believed his anger was my fault, as he said so. He only showed his angry side to me while saying he doesn't get angry, and he'd say he's angry because of me. He'd tell me to leave and then get angry when I left. Why are you doing this to me? I was made wrong to get upset when he questioned paternity. I'm building my self-esteem. I'm standing up for myself and kids. He pushes my buttons every day. I feel on purpose. Couples therapist advised me to ignore his button pushing for 30 days, that he'll see I'm not the cause for his pain. I haven't been able to do it for 30 days straight. I'd feel like a doormat that he could do whatever he wants and laugh at me. If I can, I ignore the traps. But he'll find new ways to push my buttons, followed by gaslighting, such as, oh, you're imagining that. Why would I ever do that? That never happened. So my question is, what would be a healthier option for me? Ignoring his attempts to get my reaction, or saying, that's not okay, I won't accept that, and setting boundaries? And should I do it all the time? Really good questions. First of all, let's just remember that hijackals, those difficult, toxic, and often disturbing people that we talk about here, they will always make everything your fault. So, of course, his anger is your fault. And then you uncovered another piece, which is he shows his anger to you and then doesn't show it to other people. I would bet he probably has occasionally shown it to other people, but mostly what hijackals do is show the worst to the person that they say they love the most, or the people at home that they say they love the most, and then put on a good show outside of the house, which is really crazy making, because when you go to tell somebody what's happening to you, they have no experience of that. So they say, oh, I can't believe that of him or her. So there's two things. First of all, he says, anger is your fault. That's what a hijackal will always do. Then he blames you for his anger. It's always your fault, of course, but then he's not going to take any responsibility for his part in anything. So yay, you're building your self-esteem and standing up for yourself even when he pushes your buttons. So the idea that a therapist you went to advised you to ignore his button pushing for 30 days so that he'll see you're not the cause of his pain could be advice that might work. From my point of view, I would say no. He's not going to see that you're not the cause of his pain, because you are his prey. You are the person he blames for everything. It has nothing to do with his ability to see what's so. He's perfect, and everything that goes wrong is your fault. So not saying anything about it for 30 days is a good exercise for you in some sense, but it certainly won't show him anything except that he has more power over you, because now you don't respond to him. And that will make him very angry, so he'll just push the buttons more. However, what you can do here is to simply set a boundary. And you ask that question, so I'm going to answer it here. Your question was, what would be healthier for me? Ignore his attempts to get my reaction, or saying that's not okay and I won't accept that, and setting boundaries? I think both things have their place. If you know that habitually he gets a rise out of you for certain things, you get angry, you get upset, you get sad or whatever, then when you actually respond in those ways, you feed his need for power over you. It says to him, yes, I do have power over her. Look, she's crying. Look, she's unhappy. Look, she's angry. So there's value in toning it down. But I think it has to go hand in hand with saying, I don't see it that way, or that's not how I believe it happened, or I don't think that's an accurate response. You say something that affirms and validates you. It has nothing to do with a hijackal. You're doing it for yourself. Say something that affirms and validates you, to you, for you. And then do set boundaries, but set them quietly without any great force behind them, because the force is going to be in the fact that they are non-negotiable. And how you set a good boundary is you simply say, you know, what works for me is is this an example? What works for me is to feel respected, that I know how I feel and what I think. So when I say what I think or what I feel, I expect to be heard and believed. If that doesn't happen, it doesn't change my mind. So please, I would prefer you to acknowledge that I too know what I think and what I feel, in the same way that you know what you think and what you feel. Now, don't for a minute think that the hijackal is going to have a big epiphany when you do that and go, oh my, you must be right. No, that's not going to happen, because that would be giving up too much power. You're doing this for yourself. You're doing this to validate and affirm your knowledge. Remember, the hijackal wants to be having you second guess yourself and question all your decisions and doubt your sanity. you're affirming this because you are not going to fall into the crazy making trap that in this case he is setting for you. Remember, there are just the same number of female and male hijackals. So in this case, we're talking about this woman's husband, Button's husband. So the answer to it is do both. Ignore his attempts to get a reaction, but don't ignore anything that is untrue, and speak up and have a strong boundary. State it quietly. Just state it quietly, because let him hear it for sure, but you're saying it to affirm and validate yourself. I certainly hope that helps, Button. It is a big problem, and you're obviously trying to work things out with this person. You do everything you can to strengthen and empower yourself, and if that is not enough, which it often isn't with a hijackal, then maybe you're going to have to look at doing a few things that cause a little distance from him. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, the Relationship Help Doctor. For further information, go to For Relationship Help, subscribe to my free Tips for Relationships newsletter, read the blog, and visit my YouTube channel at For Relationship Help. Talk soon. I'm so glad you spent this time with me today. I hope you heard something that touched your heart. You can have the life and relationships that you most want, and that begins within you now, today. I'm always here for you. Life can get better, and you heard that from me, the Relationship Help Doctor, Rhoberta Shaler. I work with clients throughout the world through video conferencing. We can talk. Learn more at forrelationshiphelp.com. Visit youtube.com/forrelationshiphelp. And if you want to listen to the show's archives, visit relationshiphelpshow.com. Join me for next week's show. I'll see you then. Talk soon.